Hi, Doko here. I have a coded automation template that I use for all my coded automations, and inside the template I have two tools to generate classes from Excel files. I have config to class and static class from headers. Now today we're going to have a look at the first one, config to class. What it does, it just takes a config file and generates a corresponding class file based on the contents of the settings. Now in advance, I don't know the sheet names, so the basic setup of this is I display a message box. I then browse for a file, which will be the config file. I then get the sheet names. Now using this get sheet names, I'm actually using Excel in here. So I use an Excel process scope and I use an Excel file. So when I do this, this means it will open Excel if this will require Excel to be installed on the machine. So all I'm doing here is getting the sheet names using Excel. Fair enough, but the problem I have is on some machines when I'm running this, I don't actually have Excel installed. So getting the sheet names using this method actually requires me to have Excel installed on the machine. So what I want to do is avoid using this method. So instead of using this method, the reason I need to use this method is down here when I do my read range. So I will get the sheet names, put them into an array, loop through the array, and process it. But when I do the read range, I'm doing a read range using workbook. The workbook read range doesn't require Excel to be installed, but you need to know in advance the sheet names. Now normally you do know the sheet names because you'll be reading some sort of fixed Excel file, so you'll know in advance, okay, my data's in a particular sheet. But since this is a utility, I need to dynamically read the sheets because it could be opening any config file with any names. It could be sheet 1, it could be settings, it could be constants, it could be any name in here. So I need to pass this in as a variable. So this is the problem I'm trying to solve. So what I want to do is instead of using the Excel here that requires me to open Excel, I'm going to write some C# code and call the C# code here to get the sheet names that doesn't require me to have Excel installed. So that's the basic idea of what we're doing today. You might be thinking there's probably something within the worksheet activities that allows you to get the sheet names, but actually if you have a look at the workbook activities over here, for example, there's nothing here that allows you to get the sheet names. The only way you can get the sheet names is by using the Excel activities rather than the workbook activities. Anyway, that's not the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is to replace this Excel code with this XAML code with a corresponding C# call and show you how to do the call and how to return the parameters. So we'll do that now. So to read the Excel worksheet workbook, what I want to do is I want to read it in C#, but I don't want to use any third-party tools. So there are third-party libraries you can include which would do the job, which would read the workbook, read the Excel sheets without the need for Excel install, but I don't want to use any third-party tools. So what I'll do, if I didn't know how to do this, I'd go over to ChatGPT and I would request finding Excel sheet names when Excel is not installed and not using a third-party library. So let's see what ChatGPT gives us. So it generates some code, we can see over here. So what it's saying is, if we scroll back up, it's using system data OLEDB, and it says you need a connection string, and open the connection and loop through and then get the sheet names using table name will give us the sheet name. So, and then it says you need to trim off the $. So the sheet name is the name of the sheet with a $sign at the end, so you just need to remove that $sign to actually get the sheet name. So what we'll do is we'll copy this code. So I've already copied this code over from ChatGPT and I've put it in a file called oledb.cs. So if we have a look at that file, all we've done is copied the code. We've removed this $sign because $sign was returned as part of the string from the table names from this call. So we just get our table names here, we loop through and we put them into an array of strings. So the reason we're using an array of strings here is we just want to process those strings. We're not interested in, we don't want to do any lookups using things like table name when we return. We just want to have it in an array of strings. And we return whether the call was success or failure here in the OK. So looking at the parameter calls here might look a bit strange. So we have these brackets here and then execute and brackets as the parameters for our call here into the function. So the reason we have this is these set of parameters here are what are our out parameters. So we have two out parameters. One is a boolean just saying whether the call was successful or not, and the second one is the string, the array of strings, which is the name of our sheets. We then have our execute, and the parameters here are our input parameters. So if we had in-outs, they would appear both here and here. So in this case, we're just passing in the file name. We are then using the code, the OLEDB code, to connect to the Excel, and then looping through and grabbing those sheet names and putting them in to our list of strings here, our array of strings. So this is the format of the call. So these are our out parameters, and this is our in parameter. Coming back over to our config class here, config to class, if we ran this as it is, let's have a look at how it works at the moment. So on this particular machine, I've deliberately disabled my Office license so that I have an issue. So when I run it, I will just show you the outcome of this. So if I run this tool at the moment as it's standing, I've just made a few little changes here. So the first thing it's going to do is pop up with my message box, and then it will browse, and then it will try to get the sheets using Excel. Okay, so it pops up here. This is the message box part here, and it's just saying make sure the sheets are in this particular format, name, value, description. That's what it's looking for in the config files. So okay, and then it will ask me for the file. So I'll just use the config. This is just the config I've taken out of the RE framework. I'm using that as an example. So if I open that, now it's trying to read the sheet names. So it's going to try to open Excel and access those sheet names using Excel. So you can see here that I'm not signed in to my Office. So it's giving me some sort of error, or if Office wasn't installed, it would give me some error. So I close this. Uses view only. It will still read the sheet names, but obviously there's some issue here. And if Excel wasn't installed, it wouldn't read the sheet names at all. So you can see at the end, it's read the sheet names, and it's given me what the result is, the class settings, the class constants. So it's done the job, but obviously if Excel wasn't installed, it wouldn't even get that far. It would just fail. So what I'm doing is just replacing that read sheets with the code that I've taken from ChatGPT. So if we go back over to our code here, and what I'll do is I'll replace this get sheet name with a call to my C# code that I've just created. So I've got a call down here, just put it down here, I'll bring that up. And this call here is just invoking the workflow. So inside here, I'm just doing an invoke workflow. This is the OLEDB CS that we've just created over here. We've got our out parameters, our in parameter. So we have a look at our arguments. And we have our file path, which is just the name of the file. In this case, it'd be config.xlsx. The names are going into this array of sheet names. And then we have a result, an out parameter, whether everything was okay or not. So these are the three parameters, and they match up to those parameters. If we open the workflow, they match up to these parameters, the out parameters here and the in parameter. So we just return using this format. Out is true, or we could have set this to true, and the names which are initialized here over here. So now if we replace that in our flowchart, come over here, instead of calling this get sheet names, which we just saw we had a problem with, what we'll do is we'll just change it to call our C# code, and we'll link it up over here. And now we'll run it with our C# code instead of our Excel call here. So if we run that, let's see the result. So a message box pops up. And now what it's doing, it's going to ask us for which file you want to use. So we say config, open the config file, and you can see Excel is not running down here. There's no Excel popping up, so it's doing the workflow in the background. It's accessing the workbook in the background, reading the sheets. So if we didn't have Excel installed, or it wasn't activated, then we wouldn't have an issue. and then you can see it's popped up with the same result. So you can see the result is the same. It's read the sheets, put it into constants, and put it into settings. So we have avoided using Excel here, and that saved us some potential issues. If we were running this XAML file on a machine that didn't have Excel installed or didn't have it activated, then we'd run into a problem because we're using the use Excel here, whereas instead we just replace that with our C# code. So we are highlighting how to call a function, a C# workflow from our XAML, and how we would pass the parameters, the setup of these parameters, because these parameters are, if you're not used to it, it's a bit unusual how you specify this, the out parameters in the brackets here and the in parameters like this, and then doing the return like this. So this is how you do call. So thank you very much. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you next time on the next video. Farewell.